Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Women's AM. I am your host Shahina, and today we have with us Shahina Islam, also my namesake, and we are talking about youth and their struggles and pressures. You know, it only takes a little observation or time amongst our youth to realize the huge amount of pressures they face. Their struggles can never be talked about enough. Hence, Women's Aim today will be dedicating its time to raising awareness on the numerous challenges that our youth have to deal with on a daily basis. I have with me Shahina Islam, a youth worker, vlogger and community activist. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Shahina.
Now, how do we deal with this? Shahina and Shahina. It sounds very odd.
It does, indeed.
So I'm going to stick to calling you Shahina Islam.
That's fine.
Okay, Jazakallah khair for coming on the show. Very happy to have you here. I know you've been on here quite a few years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while.
So just thought we'd ask you, since then and now Women's AM, what would you say what is it? Is there a difference? What would you say?
I think from the beginning it's been one of the best shows. Yeah, and I'm not just saying it because I'm on. Alhamdulillah. You know, Muslim women being out there confidently speaking about current issues, whether it's sort of here in the UK or internationally, it's amazing. And to see what sisters are doing out there now, you know, whether they're teachers, whether they're lawyers, doctors, you know, counsellors and stuff, it's really nice. So I wouldn't say there's much of a difference in terms of excellence, but alhamdulillah, I think it's progressing.
I did not tell her to say this, by the way. Just so you know, there's no blank check coming your way, but Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. That's very sweet to hear. But tell us a little bit about some of the work that you do, because I know you do vlogging and quite a bit of travel writing, which we will actually talk about in the final part of our show. So what are your vlogs about?
My vlogs are mainly aimed at Muslim youth, sort of young girls who are maybe in their teenage years, maybe sort of struggling, who are trying to practice. You know, we've all come to that point in life where we think, okay, I want to cover more, I want to start praying, I want to become more, you know, Islamic and worship Allah as well as do everything else. So I think it's that point where there's a lot of confusion, you know. And so, I mean, I've been pushed by family and friends saying, Shahina, do this, maybe you can do this, and, you know, just little tips and advice. You know, how to carry yourself.
What is it called?
Well, I call it's hashtag #ShahinasVlogs. You probably see it all over Facebook, Instagram, on YouTube as well. So, and as well as my travel vlogs as well. So it's a bit of a mix of everything. Anything for the youth that is relatable with their reality, and you know, stuff that they can take on and where they can start.
Sounds really interesting. Have you received quite a bit of feedback?
Alhamdulillah,
do youth get in touch with you because of it?
Yes, they do. I do get a lot of comments on my YouTube as well as my social media. I've had revert sisters contacting me. I've done videos about the abaya, etc. And sisters have contacted me saying they've struggled with this, and alhamdulillah, they've taken it on. So it's been, alhamdulillah, very positive.
Okay, that's brilliant. Jazakallah khair. That makes you a very apt person for our topic today, youth, their struggles and pressures. And welcome back to Women's AM. We are talking about youth struggles and pressures, and I have with me Shahina Islam, a community activist, a vlogger. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I know this is your thing. You've been looking forward to talking about this topic. You know, it only takes a little observation or time amongst our youth to realise the huge amount of problems that they are facing. As I mentioned earlier. So, and we do cover this topic a lot, and you know, one can claim why we're constantly talking about the youth. It's because we have to, because they're continuously facing these pressures. What would you say to that?
Let's face it, the youth are the next generation. If we are not going to be aware about how the next generation are growing up, and that's their future, right? And then as Muslims, the future for Muslims is Islam, how to carry it, how to be. So if they lose themselves in that process, it'll be upon us, you know.
And the thing is, it's not just one or two things they're facing. I mean, you could look back to our time. We thought things were quite tough then, but compared to then and now, the amount of increasing pressures and difficulties and challenges that they are facing, do you think we as adults are comprehending that challenge enough?
I think, let's be real, you know. there are many problems from both sides, whether it's youth, parents, guardians. You know, we can easily end up, you know, taking one side and then not understanding the whole reality, which could leave a bad taste, whether it's the youth or the parents thinking, well, we've done enough, or the youth saying, oh, our elderly people, you know, the older generation don't understand, they don't know our new struggles. So I think it's just understanding pressures from both sides. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was always surrounded by youth. You know, you say, is it something that we should always discuss, or are we discussing too much? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was always surrounded by youth. You know, he was 50 plus, and he had young people as Ali radiallahu anh, who was probably 7 years old, 7 to 11 when he accepted Islam. Why? Because the Prophet always stayed close to youth, you know. He advised them, he understood them. You know, we have to really take the seerah, the Prophet's life, and view it as real life example, and how to sort of deal with our youth who are facing pressures. And what pressures are we talking about? I wouldn't really say there's more pressures today than it was yesterday, because clearly the human way of life, relationships, you know, society, personal life, and that, it's all pretty much the same. You know, human beings don't change that much. So it's dealing with those.
One would disagree with you for the reason that previously we didn't have social media. We didn't have access to information as we do now. We didn't have these Snapchats, and we didn't have all these filters so accessible to us. That was pretty much restricted to those who work for magazines or were on the front cover or pages. But now all of this is at the click of our fingers, in terms of you have online bullying, you have people critiquing you in terms of how you look, you have youth seeking validity by posting pictures of themselves and or getting a maximum number of likes as possible. There are new challenges. Yes, I think the certain challenge is still the same, but there are increasing amount of challenges and access to things that the youth have now, and access to themselves as well. Online, being access to people, whereas bullying used to be left outside the home, now it comes into the house. So there's a number of all these other pressures. But what are some of the struggles that you come across that when you work with youth and youth projects, because you do a lot of that, isn't it?
Yes, I work with the youth, mashallah, and I'm talking about a range of sort of very young girls to teenage to 21 years old. So as you can imagine, I come across a lot of issues, situations, positive, negatives from the youth. I think, and me being a social media, if you want to call it a savvy, I'm literally on every social media page you can talk about. So I come across a lot of these issues that youth face. So I see the pressures. I see the sort of, you know, the body images, the pressures of identity, you know, entertainment industry, how much is taken over our lives, if you want to call it. Now, I think it's like I said, it's still understanding how to be as a Muslim, how you carry yourself, whether it's online or offline. Now, I'll give you a small little example. When the Prophet ﷺ was inquired by a young girl, so she came to ask him a question, and next to him was a young boy, and he kept looking at the young lady, and the Prophet noticed that, okay, there's some sort of attraction going on, so he moved the face of the boy, and then he looked again, and then they were looking at each other, and he done it again. This happened a couple of times. Now, the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell him off and said, Astaghfirullah, what are you doing? How dare you look at each other? He didn't advise the girl in, oh, you need to cover yourself or do something else. So clearly she was covered, she was a Muslimah. Now, what I mean is he later on went and he understood the reality, which is, okay, these two young people are attracted. So he advised the boy about marriage. Now, it's those things that we need to still carry on, you know, speaking to our youth. Hence, it goes back to the first question. We have to be in touch with our youth. I mean, we have to, you know.
We will come to that more, but in terms of pressures, like peer pressures, body image, confusion about identity, are some of these like the problems that you come across that they face?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I think body image is a big one. It's not just girls. Boys have the same issue as well. You know, this constant sort of magazines.
And increasingly so, actually.
Of course, of course. In fact, it's I think it's mentally and physically draining people, you know, and hence we have all these new disorders coming about, you know, and I don't think people understand how to deal with it. Muslim or non-Muslims alike, people really don't know how to deal with it because they're having to work, study, maybe look after a family, as well as have this perfect image, whatever perfect means. And I think with the whole fashion and, you know, cosmetics industry, there's constant changes, you know, contour the face, contour the nose, and the face should look like this and the skin should look like this. It's constant.
It's actually, it's pretty much, whereas this didn't really affect Muslim girls as much previously, it is affecting them much more so now. So alongside wearing the hijab, there's almost this pressure to compensate for the wearing the hijab. So you have a lot of makeup vloggers that are being followed, and so you have girls completely plastering the face. No, it's not even light makeup, it's completely plastering their face and changing the way that it looks via the contouring and all these other tricks. Now that is a pressure in itself, because there are a lot of girls out there who don't know how to step out of the house without doing that.
You know, the amazing thing is I was having a conversation with some sisters who are actually makeup vloggers, right? And so they wear the hijab, and they actually say, look, we're not trying to push an Islamic image, you know, we're just makeup artists. And I said, but actually, because you have the hijab on, you are seen as an Islamic personality. So therefore, if you have a video with your husband, if you have a video about your kids or holidays, people will look and think, oh, she's a Muslim lady who wears the hijab and she's doing everything else. You know, you are actually seen as a Muslim personality, as an Islamic one. So even you don't know what ideas you are pushing and what impact, do you see, the impact they're giving to the youth?
I think we do have to come to a point now we need to be able to differentiate that, because there are people who may visibly look Islamic, yes, and that they are Muslims as well, alhamdulillah, but who do claim it's a career thing and it's more about career rather than being a role model for Muslims. And I think maybe Muslims need to become a bit more conscious about that and make that differentiation, although it is difficult and challenging. Are adults being empathetic enough and approachable enough, or are we making it harder for them?
I think
what do the kids that come to your youth project, what do they say to you?
I mean, their struggles are, like you said, the whole social media thing. There's different struggles in schools and colleges and universities. So as well as the image pressure, that's one thing, right? That's more of a daily thing, I think. You know, people are constantly worried about how they look. And then there's the pressure of obviously doing really well in their education. And then it's trying to get their place into uni. It's just constant. And maybe parents not understanding their reality about certain things, relationships. So something as simple as, okay, Muslims don't have boyfriends. So how do you deal with, relationships? How do you deal with your emotions? How do you deal with your feelings? Like you said, people don't need to...
Except a lot of young people do now have boyfriends and girlfriends. That is another big... I'm glad you mentioned that. I think a relationship is another challenge, and the reality is the youth, they are human beings. They have instincts. They feel attraction. So in that case, what do they do? Because, like I said, there's access to so much information now, access to so many different things that are pressuring them to go out and seek out partners.
Yes, I think it's where are they getting their help from and advice from. So, for example, in the UK, I'm born and bred in London. Schools have certain, subjects that they push, sex education, for example. There's a lot of things out there. You know, you can get so many things for free on the NHS, for couples to get together and enjoy themselves. Now, in Islam,
sex education isn't even the worry now. If you see the kind of films and let's just say pornography that people easily get access to, and that it's a fact, and statistics and research have shown that youth are being affected by that, and the Muslim youth aren't excluded from that, except these aren't things that are talked about.
I think the thing is, family values is something that Islam pushes and encourages, which is marriage, having children, etc. Yeah, this is not something we see around. I'm talking about UK because we live in the UK. These are girls I'm dealing with in the UK. Everywhere is do what you want. If you feel attracted, go for it, you see. So if family values is not being pushed, what is being pushed is the opposite, which is have your fun and do what you please, etc. But as Muslims, we know there is halal and haram. There are certain limits you do not pass. So whether we like it or not, we kind of have to go back to, okay, how do we as Muslims carry ourselves?
Let's try and answer that question after the break, inshallah. So let's quickly go after the break and see you back in a bit. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Women's AM. I have with me Shahina Islam to talk about youth struggles and pressures. So far we've talked about some of the struggles and you've given us a lot of examples. I think, but what I would like to ask is, are we as adults and community creating enough safe spaces for youth?
Are we talking about the Muslim community?
Yes, Muslim community.
Okay. I think over the years there has been a struggle within youth entering the masjid that might not look Islamic, if you want to call it. Maybe they just come from the streets and thought, I need to pray salah. And then they've been given a bad taste within the masjid. I think that's changed a lot. If you look at that attitude...
The masjid hasn't really been a community hub like it should be, although
True.
I think there's a lot of discussion happening around that, and a few masjids here and there are catching up to that and providing those kind of services. But I don't think grown-ups and the elders in the community have really been able to comprehend some of the pressures that the youth go through, especially one of the reasons because it just doesn't get talked about, especially the things where there's more shame and embarrassment around it. But coming to the whole identity confusion, because I know you wanted to touch on that more, especially under the current climate of Islamophobia, youth are struggling to express themselves, their thoughts, their views, their ideas. And when the Muslims are constantly created as the other, constantly attacked in the media and criticised, especially when something happens, then the spotlight sort of falls on the Muslim, and the youth are at the forefront of dealing with it, because every day they're going to work, they're going to college, they're going to uni, and they're facing the consequences of that kind of climate that's being created. So identity is one of those things that they get confused about. Have you found a lot of kids come to you and say that?
There's been a lot of discussions, as you say. Even before identity and before, unfortunately, our youth have a lot of questions to answer, much more than probably our times in school. When I say answer, something happens in the news, all the youth in the class, all the Muslims have to answer questions, SubhanAllah, if we go back to that, if you look at a person that you're responsible of, whether there's a child, a student, or your spouse, if you neglect that person or a child, what happens? They may go off rails, they may become careless. So what will happen to that child? He or she will go and look for, they need answers about life, about general things. They will go and find it in other places. Maybe not the right place, they will find it in other places. They will find ways to fill in their gaps, fill in that void. SubhanAllah, whether it's the streets, whether it's entertainment, music, movies, etc. Now, as Muslims, if you are struggling with, holding on to simple Islamic principles and values, whether it's covering or the hijab, or staying away from certain free mixing, etc. Yeah, the thing is that they may struggle with that. On top of that, they have loads of questions to answer which they're not sure about themselves. Where do they turn to? Of course, we as adults, we have to be their supportive guardians. We have to be their helpers. We need to be with them. If we disconnect ourselves with the youth life and think we're adults, we know better, we've got it, we're fine, leave them to it, they'll grow out of it. No, what are they growing up? It's like a seed, Shahina. If you plant it in a pot, how can you plant a seed in a pot and just leave it to it, and let nature take its course? You have to do your bit. Now, if you're not nurturing that seed in a particular way, it will grow into a plant that you did not expect. So I think it's very, very important as adults.
If it grows at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
What thing is it? Do you think there's an element of the elders in the community burying their heads in the sand? And I don't think I don't mean just the elders. I mean even those of us in the 40s and 50s. Do you think that? How many conversations has been had? Say, for example, the growing problem of pornography.
Absolutely. I think I haven't reached 40s yet, but I'm in between the 30s age, and that's literally in between, I would say, the youth and, like you said, the elderly community. It's really understanding that, yes, the elderly community had a different reality. They came to this country, they worked hard, they put food on the plate. Now,
okay, put aside our uncles and aunties. Are we burying our heads in the shoulders? Because I really don't hear this conversation being had enough.
I think there has been a lot of change. I think people are speaking about these issues, whether it's pornography, whether it's, even homosexuality, certain emotions and feelings that children are going through, whether they're being taught in school, whether they're taking it from movies. I think people are discussing it. But like you said, I think there needs to be more done. Yes, there are certain subjects that are taboo. We need to talk about it. Drugs, alcohol, these are things that have been going on for years. Muslim, non-Muslims alike, we need to be able to speak about it and put this shame thing, taboo and culture stuff to aside, because Islam, clearly, we believe Islam has answers for everything. So why are we shy to discuss these things? No questions were wrong to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He accepted all questions, because he said, if they don't ask me, where will they find it?
And I think that's a really important point, the fact that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never turned anyone away, never made them feel embarrassed about any question that they asked. In fact, Islam encourages you to ask, and it says there is no haya in seeking knowledge. Yet we send our youth out there, expect them to be perfect, kick them down when they make the slightest mistake, and yet we leave them pretty much out in the jungle to fend for themselves, when we need to be there, their pillar, their source of comfort, the people that they come to for help and advice, and the people who are empathetic towards them. Because if we are not empathetic towards them, if we are not supportive and understanding without the judgment, they will go elsewhere to seek that comfort. And this is something that we really, really need to understand, because it's driving a lot of the youth away, not just away doing things, but leaving Islam even.
But Shahina, someone could say, well, that's not really my problem. For example, I'm not a mother yet. So I'm married, I don't have kids. Why am I doing so much for the youth? Because the youth of the Muslim community belong to me and I belong to them. right? It comes down to the hadith, and this is what made me so much more a focus for the youth. Be a youth worker, mingle with the young girls and understand their reality, and help build them. And it comes down to the hadith by Sahih al-Bukhari, where Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Each of you is a guardian, and each is responsible for those under his care. The ruler who has authority over people is a guardian and is responsible for them. A man is a guardian of his family and is responsible for them. A woman is a guardian of her husband's home and children and is responsible for them." And it goes on to say, a servant is a guardian of his master's property and is responsible for it. So all of you are guardians and are responsible for your charges. And I think it really comes down to, what am I responsible for? What will Allah question me on? It's not just me, myself and I, and I'm just going to do my own thing,
I think this is also a nice reminder that we as a community are responsible for our youth.
Absolutely.
And the saying, we say this a lot, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think we really do need that village back, but one that is the one that consists of compassion, empathy, sympathy, support, rather than one that is judgmental and turns people away. And I do think we need to build ourselves as a community, and we are. But there's a lot more improvements that can be made. In terms of role models, do we have current role models do you think we need current role models for our youth, and that is something that is lacking?
I think, like I keep saying, and I say it because I grew up in this society, the same society that the youth are struggling today. I think from before, there's a lot more role models now in terms of Muslim women who are covering, who are praying, who are vocal. They're out there in the community. They're on the platforms and speaking, whether it's teaching Quran, whether it's, raising young girls to become teachers, mothers of the next generation. There is a lot out there. But I think there needs to be more out there, more of Muslim women who, whether they're vloggers or teachers, etc., that are really strong on their Islamic character, Islamic personality, and they're not ashamed of it, and seeing that, because the child will look like they say, the child looks up to the mother. If the mother is scared of a bumblebee, the child will be scared of the bumblebee, not understanding what it is. So these young youth are always looking up to us. It could be the subtle things. Now we need more people that are stronger on their Islamic personalities and then carry themselves in a way where youth will emulate. And where do we get that? Our examples are obviously al-Mu'mineen, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's daughters, our mothers, etc. We have plenty of examples. I think it's just really being confident, thinking, yes, we have done a lot and we need to do more, and carry on. There's no, who says the line and there's going to be a state of perfection? No, it's a constant struggle.
Absolutely, and I think in terms of the role models, we need to be a lot more relatable to the youth, but also at the same time bearing in mind that we don't compromise our conduct and our characteristics and personalities to be able to do that. There's two extremes. We need to be able to keep the balance and show that the youth that, you can maintain these characteristics, you can be firm in Islam, and you can deal with these challenges head on and inspire them to be able to do that. And you've come to the end of this discussion pretty much. So do you have any final messages and advice that you would like to give to the youth?
To the youth, definitely. It's a beautiful quote that I've read from Imam az-Zuhri, where he said, "Do not underestimate yourselves because of your young age." Whenever Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh faced a difficult matter, he would invite the youth and consult them, seeking the sharpness of their intelligence. So you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that I am a Muslim, and I have struggles, and I am created weak, but nothing is impossible. You can be the strong personality who is out there, community. You help yourself and help others around you. Do not belittle yourselves just because of young age. Islam has never looked down on somebody because of a young age.
No, absolutely. And we have some great figures from our Islamic history who have achieved great, great things. And I think there are so much more youth actually out there, because we've got to give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely.
Whilst they face challenges, there are so many youth out there who are doing amazing and brilliant things. And I meet them every day, and they are actually really inspirational. Makes me ask, what did I do when I was that age? But may Allah make it easy for everybody and make our youth go on to become great people and overcome their challenges.